This is the Vegas Huddle with Mike Davis.
Welcome back inside the Vegas Huddle. I'm your host, Mike Davis. Today, I'm with a guy who I wanted to interview since I met him. I met him about 4 years ago, and this guy is one of my favorite people in all Las Vegas. Not only is he the GM of South Point Arena, I got this great swag here. Got to show that for everybody right there. But he's also a member of the Southern Nevada Sports Hall of Fame. He played not only as a captain, and I believe he was also a scholar athlete at UNLV, played from 82 to 86. We got the great Steve Stallworth here with us inside the den, the Vegas Huddle. Steve, it's apropos to have a QB in the Vegas Huddle. It's the best kind of position to have here in the huddle.
Well, I don't know, Mike. I don't know if there's room for two quarterbacks, man, but I'm going to step back. You're the quarterback in this huddle today, man. But thanks for having me. It's been fun following your career and what you've done your whole, your life, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I'm so excited to be with you. So let's break down a couple things before we get into your whole story. So first of all, played from 82 to 86 QB. Your career, you had 3,789 passing yards, 23 TDs. But even in high school, you were one of the top 100 athletes to ever come out of Yuma High School. So let's start in Yuma before we get to everything here with the Rebels. So Yuma, you're growing up small town.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, when you start playing athletics, did you just take to it very quickly? How was child life growing up in,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yuma?
My dad was a great influence on me and was a former football player in high school, dropped out when he was a sophomore in high school. He and my mom were 16 when I was born. They
Wow.
were sophomores in high school.
16.
And yeah, sports was, for me, it was an outlet. My dad ended up being married 5 times, my mom 4 times. I had stepbrothers, half-brothers, half-sisters.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and it was, and we were all athletes. We all just played sports. I mean, 365, 24/7. I mean, it was, you never came home until the streetlights came on, right? So football, basketball, baseball, whatever was going on, that's what we did in Yuma. So I was blessed to be part of that small town where you could do that.
Yeah.
Nowadays these kids, it's hard for them to play all 3 sports.
Right, you have to specialize.
Everything, yeah. But no, Yuma was a great place to grow up. All my family is still there. My little brother's a very, very successful football coach there. All my sisters and brothers, my mom, everybody's doing great.
And wait, so hold on. Break down the family dynamics here. So your parents, I mean, you grew up, were they divorced? At what point do they get divorced? All that kind of stuff.
Well, mom and dad got divorced when they were 18, so that didn't last very long.
Oh, my God.
That was a 16 to 18 program. That's right. And then my dad thinks that he's Lorne Green from Bonanza. I don't know if some of your viewers go back that far, but he had 3 sons with 3 different wives.
Oh, my God.
All athletes, and we're all very, very tight. We're just still very, very close. So. But yeah, that was our kind of family dynamic. For me as a kid, it was great. You got to go to 4 different houses for Christmas. You got, brothers and sisters everywhere.
But I mean, it was unconventional.
Great.
I mean, because divorce was different back then than it, is today.
Very much, very, very different. And all of my moms and stepmoms, everybody got along, and still do today. So you're right. It was very different back then than it is now. But no regrets. It was a great life growing up, and like I said, we continue to be close and everything else to this day.
So when you start taking to sports at a earlier age, and you are playing a little bit of everything, how do you kind of take to football specifically? Why did that become your sport?
Well, it's funny, in Yuma at the time, Pop Warner, you had to be 9 years old, or I think 9 or 10, so you couldn't start too young back then. And then there was a weight limit and this and that. So my very first year, I actually was one of the bigger kids. So the coach put me on the line. I played center and defensive tackle.
What? Oh, my God.
And then that's when my dad got involved. And he knew, just based on who I was, he knew that was not going to be my future. So he took over coaching after that and made me a quarterback. And, we just went from there. Mike, it's funny, though. I was probably a better baseball player.
Really?
When it was all said and done. But as you know, going into college, football is where the scholarship money was. So football became the became the avenue.
And why do we see so many QBs tied to baseball? I mean, I guess it's a natural thing with the throwing arm. I mean, Elway, Brady was drafted, Russell Wilson was drafted. There's definitely some parallels. What do you think it is from a player's point of view?
You know, I think for me, I'm not sure about these other guys. For me, I was a catcher.
Oh.
So as a catcher,
you need a good arm, though.
And you're the quarterback of the team.
Right.
You know, so for me, I found that was my love and my passion. I would have been bored to death playing any other position.
Right.
So being a catcher growing up and being the quarterback, I always felt like I was leading the huddle. I was the quarterback in the huddle, you know. So, but yeah, that was my journey with baseball for sure. My dad wouldn't let me pitch. You know, it's a different motion, pitching a baseball or throwing a football. So, you know, he was worried about me messing up my arm and the whole thing, but I really always wanted to be a pitcher, but he wouldn't let me.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, see, that's such a fascinating thing. Just because of the torque and the follow-through, it's such a
Correct.
It's such a distinction that you think maybe natural, like, tendencies, you know, in the huddle or on the field or on the diamond, you would maybe revert to other types of things and get it screwed up.
Right.
Wow.
So, yeah, that was exactly it. Didn't want me blowing out my arm and everything else. And you know what? In hindsight, he was probably right, you know, so it all worked out.
And then at Yuma, I mean, you must have had the stellar career. Tell me about, you know, when you're there playing and you finally get on the field as a quarterback. I mean, you have to be thinking much differently. It's like, you know, a catcher on the diamond. Why do you think did you have more of the natural abilities, or was it more upstairs in the head where you really set yourself apart?
I think that was more it, Mike. I mean, you know, back then you could really, as a quarterback, be more of a thinking man's quarterback. You know, now these quarterbacks are so athletic. I mean, it's just amazing how athletic they are now. But back then, I think it was my, as they would say, intangibles, probably.
Right.
It was not the natural athletic ability, I can guarantee you that. I was blessed in a weird way. Our team was not that great. I started as a sophomore, and, you know, obviously we got better as we went on to my senior year, but so we threw the ball a lot. You know, we were behind a lot, so we got to throw a lot.
Wow.
So I got exposed in a good way that way, you know. I've seen so many great quarterbacks that, you know, they would get caught in a high school where they ran the ball 50 times a game and the kids never got to show themselves, you know.
Right.
So I was fortunate that way that I had some coaches that, you know, they saw a little bit of talent. They saw that we had some success when we threw the ball. So we threw the ball quite a bit, which was great.
And as you're graduating and getting to that point where you're fielding offers, how did UNLV come to be?
So it's funny how UNLV came to be. I always wanted to be an Arizona State Sun Devil. I mean, I wanted to play for Frank Kush. I wanted to be a Sun Devil. That was it.
Right.
And as I was being recruited in 1981, going back a long way for your viewers and listeners here, Frank Kush got fired. All of his coaches at the time, or about 6 or 8 of them, went with Harvey Hyde, who became the head coach at UNLV. So that's how they knew about me. So I got recruited by UNLV, and I had several other offers. But I was the only quarterback that UNLV brought in that year, number one.
Wow.
Number two, and a lot of people don't know this, in 1981, Sam King was our quarterback here at UNLV. Sam King led the country. He led the nation in total offense and passing yards.
Really?
Yes, UNLV lit it up. UNLV threw the ball all over the place. Please feel free to fact check that. Jim McMahon that year, I think, was number 5. There was a guy named Dan Marino in the top 10 back then. Jim Kelly.
Yeah.
You know, you had some great quarterbacks back then. Kubiak back then.
Yeah.
Yep. So Sam King was number 1 in the country. And so Harvey Hyde was smart. He says, we're keeping our offensive coordinator. We're going to run the same offense, which was a guy named Pat Hill, which I don't know if you remember Pat, Mike, but he went on to become the head coach at Fresno State after UNLV and had a great career up there.
Interesting.
So that's how I ended up in Vegas. 17-year-old from Yuma, Arizona, coming to Vegas.
So let's talk a little bit about this. So Sam King.
Correct.
Sam King. Tell me, why does a guy like that, who is, you know, killing it at the college level, why do we not really know his name, but we know the Dan Marinos, we know the Jim Kellys, like the Jim McMahons? Like, what happens to those guys?
And I'll tell you what happened to Sam, and God bless him. Sam could not pass a physical in the NFL. He had a heart murmur.
Really?
That's correct. So Sam never got to go on and showcase his skills, and God bless Sam. He's one of my all-time favorite people of all time. One of the reasons I got married when I did, and just one of the reasons I came here. But he just had a heart transplant recently, and has just kind of had those issues. But yeah, that was Sam's story. But you're right. There are so many other quarterbacks that were just great players that, for whatever reason, just never made it to that next level. Yeah.
And the transition for you. So you come to UNLV. You have the rapport with the coaching staff that's migrating here. When you get here, the transition. I know you're coming to UNLV. I know in your dorm you had Joe Namath, a poster of that above your bed. So you were, a Broadway Joe kind of guy. But you're really taking to the city. It seems like there's a lot going on. I think it's really interesting because knowing Steve Stallworth, you would think, okay, this guy's got a lot on his plate. He's coming from Arizona. He's going to be a quarterback here at UNLV. But while you were doing that at 17, you were also working as an usher part of the time. I saw this at 17 at Caesar's Palace in '82. You were working as an usher for a Larry Holmes fight.
So I got to Vegas June 10th, 1982.
Yeah.
I was 17 years old. My dad bought me a little car that hardly ran, and he said, "You stay on this road until it ends." And then when it ends, and it ended at the Union Plaza Hotel, which we know is the Plaza, now, right? Fremont Street. When you get there, you ask them where the school is, and somebody will tell you.
Oh, my God.
And so I got to Vegas June 10th, 1982, showed up to the coach's office. They said, "Listen, tomorrow you're going to be an usher at the Holmes-Cooney fight at Caesar's Palace, heavyweight championship fight." And just an usher helping people to their seats and this and that. I didn't even know what an usher meant.
It was a job. What was it?
It was a job. We made $25.
Really?
And we got a free T-shirt, and we had to be there all day long. There were 20 fights that day. I think I made $50 in tips. And when that night was over, Mike, I said, "This is the greatest city in the world. I love Las Vegas. I'm never going anywhere else the rest of my life."
In '82.
June 11th, 1982. And anyway, there was a guy named Dennis Fenfrock at the time that owned an usher company. He was the wrestling coach at UNLV. And then he went on later to become the first director of the Thomas and Mack Center. So he owned an usher company, and all the football players and all the UNLV athletes worked for him. Gotcha. I got to see every major fight that ever came through Vegas, every major concert, all of them, because of Dennis, and we all did. We all had a great time.
And it's so full circle, because what you do now with South Point and what you did before with Orleans, it's amazing that was made such an impression on you at such a young age, that impact. But what was it about Vegas? I mean, can you put it into words? Because now it's that was '82, and now look what's on the horizon when it comes with sports in Vegas and everything that's going on.
Just bananas. My dad was a little concerned about me coming here. My dad was a cop. I was the son of a cop.
Oh, he's a cop.
All my buddies were suspects, always. And, so he had a couple of concerns, but one of our big UNLV boosters at the time was a guy named Rex Bell, and he was our Clark County District Attorney. So I was literally here on my recruiting trip, and Mr. Bell happened to be there, and we talked about it and told him my dad was a cop, and, we had a few concerns, and he goes, "I'm going to call your dad right now." So, of course, we had to find a phone, right? There were no cell phones back then. And he called my dad, and as soon as he handed me the phone, my dad goes, "If you want to go there, you can go there." So, because I told my dad, "This is it. This is my place." In fact, we were talking earlier too, Mike, that morning that I landed, I had never been on a plane before. When I landed in Vegas, we went to the Pepper Mill for breakfast.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, which again, comes circle
with the Orth family.
Yeah.
Great family. So, wow, so that was your first time ever on a plane for your recruiting trip here.
Yep.
And, I mean, you in Vegas, it's just a match made in heaven.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, I just fell in love. And, of course, later down the road, I met a girl from Vegas that was born and raised here, and I never left.
See, I love it.
There you go.
So you get here, and here's what's kind of fascinating. So, you really, 85 and 86, that's when you're really, controlling the range. You're playing 11 games. You're really doing all the stuff with the Rebels. But prior to that, in 82, 83, a few seasons, Randall Cunningham is the starting quarterback, and you're kind of, getting into the system. Explain a little bit what that was like to come to Vegas and and be in the system now with this guy named Randall Cunningham?
You bet. And, a lot of people don't know Randall's story. So 1982, again, I get here in June. August 28th, our first game was against BYU here in Vegas at Sam Boyd Stadium. Randall was fourth string that game. He was the fourth quarterback. In fact, they wanted to redshirt him. So we played against BYU that year. Steve Young was the quarterback.
Right.
We started a guy named Steve White. He played the first half.
Okay.
Another guy named Janae played the third quarter. And another quarterback named Alan White played the fourth quarter.
Why?
We got beat because they were 1-2-3. We were getting beat. We got beat 28-0 that game.
Oh, my God.
Steve Young ran all over us. He didn't pass on us. He ran all over us. The next week we had a bye, and Harvey Hyde opened the job up. He says the quarterback job is wide open. He wasn't happy with anybody. And I think really what Harvey knew is that our offensive line at the time was not that great. So Randall went from fourth string to first string in 1 week. And he started against New Mexico that next week, and the rest is history. He had an amazing game, and he became the starter from then on out.
And how does nobody see this? In practices, in scout team stuff, how does nobody recognize this until you see the fallout of everybody else playing poorly?
The three guys ahead of him were really good. They really, really were good. But they were drop-back guys. Pro-style, drop-back quarterbacks. And
if you don't have an offensive line.
Yeah, they were not athletic. Like me, I'm a drop-back guy. I was not like Randall, So they saw it, and they knew it, but, these guys were good. They were legitimate players in their own right. They were following Sam King. These guys were here behind Sam. It was their turn, But that's what happened, and Randall was just so athletic, and we didn't have any designed runs. We didn't run an option. We didn't have quarterback runs. It was really just making plays. Drop back. If it's not there, make something happen. And that's really the magic of what Randall did. So I redshirted that year in 1982, thank goodness, because Randall was only 1 year older than me.
Right.
So that created another year of separation. And then to your point, I backed him up in 83 and 84, and then I played 85 and 86.
So let's talk a little bit about Randall. Tell me what it was like, working with him in the QB room. What type of guy was he off the field?
Randall was one of the, and we saw him play this way too, very relaxed, everything, just, we all strive to be relaxed like Randall. I mean, really, it's hard to be, but he just never, nothing ever rattled Randall. On the field, off the field, he did his thing. He played relaxed, and he played, like playing in the backyard. And I think a lot of quarterbacks, I always struggled with overthinking things, right? Once you get on the field, you can't think. You can't think anymore. It's time to play, time to do it. And Randall did that better than anyone. So Randall was great that way. But, he made plays. He made things happen. There were a lot of times I was the clipboard guy, right? So, you're watching, you get the play, you call it in, and Randall would drop back. He's looking the wrong way, and we're going, he's looking the wrong way. And then he'd run around, make a play, throw it 80 yards for a touchdown. The coach would go, great play. Right? So he had that ability to make plays, and really it was fun to watch.
Riffing. It was a lot of riffing.
It was so much fun to watch.
What is the clipboard thing? For people like me who were never in a quarterback room on a football team, what does that mean?
Well, that means I had the playbook for that game. I had the game plan. So
as
I
the
was
second
there,
string.
Right, and I'm next to the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, I was calling in the plays.
Really?
Oh yeah, because I had the clipboard. I'd hear the play, and we'd call the play. If we had signals that game, we would call it in.
So the offensive coordinator would say the play, and then you would call it in.
I would give a signal on whatever the play was into the quarterback, unless we sent it in with a receiver or a running back. That was very common back then, that you gave the play to a receiver, they would run it in. Now it's all signals. Yeah, now it's all signals. Of course, the NFL, they
through the helmet.
Right through the helmet. Yeah,
right.
We don't have that in college yet.
Right.
But I was the clipboard guy for 2 years. I was talking to some guys the other day too, Mike. Back in our day, there was no transferring. You didn't transfer.
Right.
You
were there.
Yeah, people asked me, well, you didn't, why didn't you transfer? I said, transfer. The only guys that really transferred are the guys that got in trouble.
Right.
know?
It wasn't like, oh, I show up and now, Randall's going to be the guy. I want to go to another university.
We
right.
didn't have that back then. Yeah,
right.
we didn't have that back then. You waited your turn,
Right.
So there were probably a lot of great players in our country that got stuck behind a Dan Marino or got stuck behind, a Jim Kelly that probably could have been great players somewhere else. And, timing's everything, and I had great timing as well. I mean, I always tell people by the time I became the starter, the coaches looked around and said, wow, you're the only one left. Get in there, man.
But that's amazing, and we'll get into that in a second. The one thing I do want to stay on Randall with is, this was a different era of quarterback. I mean, yes, there were the guys like the Fran Tarkentons who would run a lot with the Vikings, or Steve Young was doing it with BYU, and there was a little bit of that. Even I guess years earlier you saw a little of that, but when it came to this new era, I mean, Randall really ushered in a new type of quarterback style. We wouldn't see, I don't think, the Michael Vicks, the Lamar Jacksons, the way that we're seeing the NFL operate now with the Jalen Hurts and all those types of guys. So seeing that unfold in front of your eyes with that type of athleticism and that dynamic ability, did everybody recognize how special of a thing this was and how this was going to almost set the stage for the future? Or how was everybody, kind of interacting and engaging?
Yeah, I don't think we were that savvy to know that. I don't think we were that smart. We just had a lot of success, and Randall was fun to watch. He was exciting. He was dynamic. But no, I don't think we ever thought, oh, wow, this guy's going to be a first-round draft pick and play in the NFL for 17 seasons like he did.
Right.
And we didn't know that we were ushering a new era, but you're right, Mike, we really did. I mean, it was really, and up until that time, we did have some African-American quarterbacks, but it was guys like Doug Williams, drop-back guys.
Right.
James Harris with the Rams played back in the 80s, and he was a drop-back guy.
Right.
But Randall was really one of those first quarterbacks like that was just an absolute threat every time he touched the ball, and it was exciting. You couldn't wait for him to touch the ball, And back then, Mike, we never ran shotgun. Now
really?
What they do, no, every snap we had was from the center, Even I don't want to say most, but probably most of his NFL career too, he was under center. I think if he could have played in some of these offenses now, these spread offenses in shotgun, I mean, he would have even been more dynamic.
Right.
So
even Warren Moon and stuff,
Warren Moon was
under center.
He was, and he was a drop back.
He didn't do shotgun
guy.
all
No, we never did shotgun back then.
Wow.
That was a dead giveaway. If you did shotgun, you were throwing the ball.
Right.
So, yeah, the other thing back then for a lot of us, Randall included, is it was a running backs era back then. Right? So it was sweep right, sweep left, and the only time we threw the ball is when it was third and long,
It's crazy.
So you look at some of the completion percentages of some of these great quarterbacks back then, they were in the low 50s in a lot of cases because, you're not throwing the ball unless it's 3rd and 15,
right.
Or 3rd and 12 or whatever. So it was really the big running back era. I'll never forget in college, we heard about this guy. He was up at Portland State, and he was running this thing called the run and shoot. And he had 4 receivers. And I was like, wow, this guy's got 4 receivers. You know what I mean? Now we've got 4 receivers on every play.
Right. Yeah, the 4 receivers. So it's interesting. Yeah. And you also played with Ickey Woods.
Yep.
So
he was my fullback. Yeah.
And so I mean, you had a lot of great guys there. But it is fascinating. So the way that when you watch football on Sundays now, and even college on Saturdays, like the way that the league has shifted really to passing, completely. And it's all about spacing and, taking advantage of, the field and the sidelines. And you see just how, certain teams, like the Dolphins with Mike McDaniel and how they're operating with these different types of players on the field. The transition to how the league looks today, you almost feel like, man, if I could have played quarterback in this era? Very
different. And even some of these colleges, And what a lot of people don't realize is first of all, these kids have gotten so athletic now, and these offenses so intricate. But And we all know that defensively now the game has changed.
Right.
I mean, our receivers would get hammered off the line. I mean, you'd be lucky if our receivers got off the line back when I played, right? So now the defense is different. But what a lot of people don't know either is that for the offensive line, especially in college, now I was in Michigan a couple weeks ago. Their offensive linemen kept coming and coming and coming, so they had a bunch of them. But a lot of these colleges, after the first string offensive line, there's not a lot of depth. But pass protection is way easier than run blocking. So what these colleges learn, too, is that I can save my offensive linemen a little bit.
Interesting.
It's easier to pass block than it is to run block. So, and less wear and tear on the body.
Gotcha.
So that played a role into all this as well.
I never heard that. That's a very interesting thing.
So, but yeah, the passing game now is amazing. Watching what some of these kids do, and these pass defenses have gotten real creative. We saw in the UNLV game versus Vanderbilt the other day. Our young quarterback threw an interception there at the end of the game. A defensive tackle dropped into coverage in the flat, which is very unique and clever. So these defenses are trying to do things too to overcome a lot of that. But it's hard to stop these real good offensive teams.
Let's talk about, since this is the Vegas Huddle, I always love talking with quarterbacks, and that's why I think I took to you so well, even in our personal lives and meeting each other on different things via Fox 5, because, you're just an intellectual guy, but you're also a guy's guy. And I think quarterbacks, you have to be able to, your attributes, you have to be able to connect easily with people and be a leader, but also be somebody that, people want to follow and, a good hang kind of thing. But then you also have to be able to, play above the rim and have that intellect to kind of just, work with a lot of different things and know everybody else's role, on the field as the quarterback. So take us inside, as this is the Vegas Huddle, just take us a little bit into what it is really like to be a quarterback and how that has served you so well as, a leader in our community here in Las Vegas. You're involved in so many, organizations. You're a part of, the subcommittee now with the Super Bowl coming to town. So how have those, things, those elements from the field kind of served you in this second part of your life?
Yeah. There are so many cliches you can talk about, right, with football and, the discipline and the determination and, the commitment to excellence and all, all those kind of things. But you mentioned something, Mike, that for me, I think was so valuable. And that's just being in the huddle with guys that share a common goal. And if you've never been in the huddle, you don't quite know what that means, and there have been a lot of people that will say this way better than I have, and a lot of coaches especially that will say this way better than I will say it. But when you're in that huddle and you look around at those other 10 guys, you got white guys, black guys, Hispanic guys, Jewish guys, tall guys, skinny guys, fat guys, dumb guys, smart guys. I mean, you have society is in the huddle with you right now. And you talk about diverse, there is nothing more diverse than that huddle. And to know that we can all try to execute our role for that play to do something successful is really fascinating when you think about it. And for me, I look at my life the same way. I look at my job the same way. My employees get tired of hearing all the football analogies, but it's true. I mean, it's just an analogy for life, being in the huddle and playing football or playing any sport for that matter. But being in the huddle is something special, man. Just knowing, as when my son was coming up, and everybody's worried, concussions and this and that and getting hurt. And I said, listen, put all that over here for a second.
Right.
Who cares? Because the lessons that we learn and the things that are going to happen positively are going to outweigh any risk that any of that could possibly, happen. So, but yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing is just being in that diverse environment and everybody trying to strive to win and trying to strive for a common goal. There's nothing like it. Give
me like an example into the mic. Like, call in a play. Like, give me an example of how what you would say in a huddle, when a play's coming in. I just want to hear that Steve Stallworth kind of.
Wow, I got to think of one now. Well, back then for us, it was right 58 sweep, and it was real simple, right?
So how you say
Toss
it?
to the running back. You
Like,
know,
give me like
real
how
simple.
just like the get like, hey guys, okay, so this
Now,
you
it
know,
depends on
what
the
do you say?
situation, right, Mike?
It's 2nd and 4. Like, what are you saying?
Right, that's what you got to say. Listen, man, we need this one, guys. 3rd and 1. Let's go. Right 58 sweep. Come on now. Let's get this. Boom. Boom. We're gone, right? Because you can't waste a lot of time. You got to go.
I love it.
You know, right slide, 72X. You know, I mean, that was a great play for us, you know. Now I hear some of these quarterbacks call plays in the huddle, and I go, "Holy cow, man!" I wouldn't be able to remember half of what these guys
And what
call
about
now.
cadence? That's such a big thing with quarterbacks. So explain
Yeah.
what cadence really is.
Well, and for us, it was real simple. First sound, you know, on check on me. Now I'm going on first sound. You know, we could just call in the huddle, you know, right slide, check on me, check me. So then I'm just going to call the play from the line.
Yeah.
You know, and depending on what color I yell out, I might go first snap, you know, instead of going on one. So a lot different now. Now they do the clap thing. You know, again, we weren't not in the shotgun.
Right.
So,
It's
you know, we
different.
didn't have a lot of that. Yeah.
At what point in your career do you start like learning how to read defenses, to know like if they're in, you know, man, if they're in zone, and, you know, like how do you start learning those things?
So I'm going to tell you how smart these kids have gotten now, Mike. For me, it was college.
That's in high school. You're not doing any of
No,
that.
in high school, it was a progression. 1, 2, 3. If that guy's not open, go to number 2. If he's not open, go to number 3.
And now, so just so I understand, the
Yes.
progression of football, right? That was even NFL. I mean, for a long time,
Yeah,
right? It
sure.
wasn't even reading defenses at the line of scrimmage. It was
Right.
progression for years in the NFL, right?
Correct. Oh,
Okay.
yeah. When I got to college, then I started learning how to read defenses and what we were doing against certain defenses. And, you know, for us, it was, hey, read the corner. If he backs up, it's going to be this. If he turns inside, it's this. If he turns outside, it's this. But I'll tell you how smart these kids have gotten. My son was probably 5 or 6 years old, 7 years old maybe, and he was trying to teach me how to play Madden on TV, you know, on the video game. And he said something like, Dad, you know, to beat that cover 2, you got to send that tight end up the middle and then the receiver out on the seam so you can put that safety in it. I said, what? The kid is 7 years old. I didn't learn that till I was in college. These kids were learning it in Madden.
Wow.
You know, so these kids that were playing these video games had a real head start, believe it or not, on a lot of. So when I started coaching my son and Pop Warner, I said, baby, it's just like Madden. If that kid drops back, you know what he's going to do, right? Oh, yeah, Dad, that's, you know, boom,
Right.
boom. So, but yeah, that has progressed a lot too. You know, we were talking in the game the other day, and I think it was Garoppolo or somebody made a great back shoulder throw to Devontae
Yeah,
Adams,
I saw
if you
that.
remember.
Yeah.
And
Like
a
double
back,
coverage.
yeah, and a back shoulder throw in my day was a bad throw. You throw a back shoulder, you underthrew him. There was no back shoulder throw. We didn't do that. That just was a bad throw that ended up being completed. So the game has changed so much in a great way. You know, we were watching the other day when the kid, Patriots, blocked that field goal and how he came running down the line.
That was very innovative. I never saw that.
How has that
and
never?
Chris Collinsworth was like, I've never seen that in my life.
Right. I mean, the game is just changing always, right? Always evolving, always different things going on. And he impacted the second field goal that was missed as well. So
the I'm curious, if you had to pick like one attribute, if you were like making a quarterback in a factory and you were going to pick one thing to make a guy successful on every level, what would that quality be?
Well, it has, for me, I mean, that's hard, right? Because you got to have a lot. But for me, it would just be, it would be the smarts of knowing the game, knowing situations, knowing what to do. It would be that whole thing. And then just somebody that's just relaxed and plays. You know, I mean, I love when Shedeur Sanders the other day said, I had to go Brady mode.
Right.
You know, and you go, we all knew what that meant, didn't we?
Right.
We all knew what that meant.
And Brady was like, I wish I could go Shedeur mode.
Right,
you know?
right, exactly.
But it's fascinating because I think for an outsider, you got to realize, like, it's different for you. It's fascinating for someone like me who's peeking in, and you see these guys like these Brock Purdy's. How could a Brock Purdy be the last player drafted, Mr. Irrelevant? I mean,
yeah.
We know how much these franchises and organizations put into scouting. into the combine, into the entire, I mean, there's millions of dollars and guys that are just fixated and focused on finding the next guy.
Yeah.
How could this guy be the last player drafted and just have such an ease to the game? I mean, I'm watching him. He has the accuracy is just next level. It's reminiscent of Brady almost, you know, how pinpoint he is and how calm, and he's just playing the game and he's not forcing. He's not, you know, he's just going through, you know, he's got a lot of great weapons and he's got Kyle Shanahan and he's got a lot of good surroundings. But how much of it is like other people could really do that, or how much of it is just the situation? You know, he gets drafted to a team that's in a good spot, but then you look at a Trey Lance who's got all the natural gifts, comes out of, you know, North Dakota State. They trade up to get him at number 2 or 3, and this guy goes into a perfect situation too. He still has Kyle Shanahan, he's got Kittle, he's got Ayuk, he's got Deebo Samuel, he's got McCaffrey, he's got all the assets there to work with, but he can't make it happen. So when that occurs, what is going on? Because Brock Purdy was overlooked.
Yeah.
I mean, so why is he able to make it happen and Trey Lance can't?
I think you answered your own question, Mike. It's all that, right? I mean, it's timing, right? And being in the right place at the right time, taking advantage of the opportunity when you can get it. I mean, so many of these kids like this get overlooked because they weren't the stellar athlete, or they weren't the stellar. I see it in college recruiting all the time, you know, with these high school kids that are unbelievable football players, but they don't run a 4.4. They don't bench 320. They don't squat 500, you know, so they're not getting the offers. They're not getting the college, but they're better football players than this
So
kid.
we can't scout that? Why are we not putting that? Why is it about the metrics of, you know, your 40 rather than just the eye test of saying this guy can play football?
Because there are a lot of coaches that don't want to take the chance. They don't want to be wrong. They don't want to be wrong, and they know this kid has the skill set that has a chance, right? And I don't know about this kid. Even though he's a great football player, I mean, look at some of the you know, Doug Flutie. It's the Doug Flutie syndrome, right? I mean, you know, nobody thought Doug Flutie could play,
right?
And look what happened.
It's to me, it's just so. I guess I'm so puzzled when I see this stuff because I feel like, to me, when I try to think about why is this the case, why is Brock Purdy doing this, I think about, to me, the chip on the shoulder helps. To me, it's the same thing with the Brady. It's the same thing with Kurt Warner, who's bagging groceries or something and gets that chance. It's almost, it fuels the fire. You know,
100%.
There's something maybe about that makes them.
And then, Mike, listen, when you get that chance, you got to take advantage.
Right.
I mean, we all remember when Drew Bledsoe got hurt. Here comes Brady, right? None of us knew who he was either, right?
Right.
And he couldn't hardly run. He was he ran a 5.2 in the combine.
Right.
I mean, so yeah, you know, where I really see it a lot, even more, is high school. I follow a lot of high school football and a lot of these high school kids, and you know, that's where I see it, and that's where it bums me out a lot. Where, you know, this kid here will have multiple offers to college and is not even near as close as a better football player than this kid. You know, so you see it a lot there and once one kid gets an offer, no other coach wants to be wrong. So then they start
So you need
piling
one.
on. So yeah, and that's what I tell these kids, or these kids as parents here that are the good players, is listen, you just need one. You need one coach to like you. That's it. You know, and once you get that one, you got to take advantage of it. You know, so that's where I see it even more than going from college to pros, for sure.
Before we get into some more stuff about what's going on here in Vegas, first of all, so Strip, that's your nickname? How did this nickname come about? Because I just call you Steve, but I want to start calling you Strip though.
So
because you had a good look. You was number 10. You had the nice flowing hair. I saw the nice hair you had.
I change my hair every year. Trust me, Mike. Whatever was going on at that time. No, you know what? The truth of that story is really pretty boring. You had mentioned it a little bit earlier. So I'm 17 years old. I move into the dorm June 10th, 1982, and the first thing I do is put up my Joe Namath poster. And It's the famous poster. It said Broadway. He was
Right.
under the street sign. Remember Broadway Joe?
That was a big poster.
That was it. Yeah. I mean, millions of kids had that poster.
Right.
So there was a guy that lived on our floor across the room who was from back east. And he grew up with Broadway Joe, Jefferson Street Joe Gilliam.
Okay,
Remember
I
from the
don't even know
Pittsburgh Steelers?
Okay,
He
I
was a
don't know
quarterback for the Steelers.
Okay.
They called him Jefferson Street Joe. And there was one other quarterback back then they named after a street. So this guy goes, Broadway Joe, Strip Stallworth.
Oh.
And it was just a kid that lived in the dorm, and he started calling me Strip, and then my roommate, Strip, oh, yeah, you know, and then next thing you know, it just caught on.
I love it. Strip Stallworth.
Yeah, so there you go.
A couple of your big, 86, Wisconsin upset, 17-7. Take me to that game.
Well, that game actually started in 85 because we played Wisconsin at Wisconsin in 1985. So 1984, you know, we went 11-2, Randall's senior year. We won the California Bowl, which is now the Las Vegas Bowl.
And you took the knee on that.
Oh, yeah. I ran
right?
out the clock for 5 minutes. Hell, and I was the All-American holder for extra points and field goals, too.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Nobody knows that. Of course,
Wait, whoa.
Well, there was no such thing, but that's self-proclaimed.
Wow.
But anyway, we went 11-2 that year and had an unbelievable team. We lost to SMU by, I think, 10 that year, and then we lost to Hawaii by 3. So we had an unbelievable year, Randall's senior year. But then we lost everybody. I mean, we lost everybody. They were all seniors. So it was all now us, right, coming up. And then in 1985, we played Wisconsin at Wisconsin. In front of 65,000 people, and it was an amazing scene, but we lost by a field goal. They beat us 26-23.
Gotcha.
So when they came to Vegas that year, we were fired up. But going into my senior year, you know, Harvey Hyde had just gotten fired, so now Wayne Nunley was our head coach my senior year. But anyway, we beat Wisconsin that year, and that was a big win for us and a big win for him, and that secured his contract and everything else. But we were disappointed that year. You know, we went 6-5. We should have done a lot better. I think we lost 3 games by a total of 7 points or something that year.
Wow.
3 of our 5. But just great players on that team. David Hollis, one of our corners, played in the league. Anthony Blue played in the league. You know, Suge Knight was our defensive captain in 1985 and 86. He played in the league.
What was he like?
The best. Suge was the best. He was a captain.
Personality-wise,
he was the first guy that would show up to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes breakfast every week. My wife loved him. We all loved Suge. Suge was the best. Now, back then, he was Sugar Bear. We didn't call Sugar Bear.
Sugar Bear.
Sugar Bear. He looked like the Sugar Bear character from the box of cereal, you know. But Suge was just a great guy.
So nobody said Suge. Everybody's Sugar Bear.
Suge, you know, but it was mostly Sugar Bear.
And did he have like a proclivity for music? Was that something?
No, not really. He just, you know what, a lot of guys after football, and especially a lot of these guys from Southern California, from LA, the LA area, if you remember, that's when the big all rap started. You know, all this gangster rap and NWA and all these guys. So these guys all went and became bodyguards. A lot of our former players did. And they were security for these guys. Gotcha. They were bodyguards on their tours and on the road. And that's kind of how Suge got into that world. And he took a left turn somewhere. But no, great teammate, great person. I mean, you know, we had a great team, great character guys. Charles Demery, another corner, played in the league a long time.
Wow.
George Thomas, one of our receivers, played in the league a long time. Tony Gladney played a couple years for the 49ers back then. You know, UNLV's always had great skill players. You know, a lot of schools like UNLV struggle with getting that depth in the offensive line and defensive line. That's really where schools like us have really struggled. But, you know, because once you got to that number 2 guy or 3 guy, you know, then you were kind of in trouble.
Right. Well, that's what they're even saying right now with Shedeur is like, you know, at Jackson State, you know, the protection was completely different and people couldn't evaluate him at the same level that they can now because all these quarterbacks that come out of USC, out of SEC programs, you know, in those power conferences, I mean, the protection level is a totally different story. So these guys 100%. Are moving with different stuff. So now the way that they've kind of revamped that offensive line, it's like now he's, coming in as maybe the second prospect outside of Caleb Williams,
Yeah, pretty wild. It'll be fun, right, when he plays Oregon and USC, and we'll see what happens.
Seeing all those guys.
Yeah.
Quickly, before we wrap things up, so just kind of, I think because you have such a love story with Las Vegas as a city and coming here and taking to the city, I mean, did you anticipate the way that this city not only has, always been the entertainment capital of the world, but now it's really becoming the sports capital of the world, having, the Raiders here, the Aces, all these, programs. We're talking about the Oakland A's now and, the Super Bowl in town and having the Pro Bowl here and the draft and all these things that are happening and the way the Vegas Knights have taken over the city from a sports standpoint and the Stanley Cup. I mean, did you ever, all those years ago, when you first come in here, you make that drive and you're asking where UNLV is and you're an usher at the Larry Holmes fight, did you ever think that this city could become like this?
I think I did, actually, but it wasn't hockey. I can tell you that. I always went. And let me back up a little bit, Mike. So, 1985, back when we played, you weren't allowed to work either, right? If you were on scholarship, you could work summer break, spring break, and Christmas break. Well, I was very fortunate because the quarterback job, Sam King had the job, Randall Cunningham had the job. The quarterback job was being a runner at R&R Advertising, which is a very prominent advertising agency here in town.
They came up with, the whole slogan of,
Correct.
What happens here stays here.
That's correct. And they were owned by a guy named Sig Rogich,
Gotcha.
R&R Advertising. So Sig was on the athletic commission at the time, Nevada Athletic Commission, when all the big fights, were here as well. And, of course, Sig would always drop tickets on us. I can say that now. Back then, I probably was not allowed to take those. So I was fortunate that I got to see this huge boxing sort of culture that took place, right? And so we were huge back then in that space. Then, I mean, it's no secret, right? In 87, we go to even prior to that in the late 70s, but 87, Running Rebels go to the Final Four.
Right.
And then in the 90s, we all saw what happened. I mean, UNLV basketball exploded. The Aviators were back then the 51. The Stars, their first name was the Stars, came to town. So I think the evolution there, and I think I always felt like we would get there, but I always thought it would be football first. I always thought, because football's made for Vegas, right? It's not 8 or 10 games, it's 8 or 10 events, is what it is. And the fact that the hockey team came in and were the first, that honestly was a surprise to me, to be honest with you. But they did all the right things, right? Their timing was good. They did all the right things in our community. They have a great staff, great organization. So
and they won.
And they won early, which was great, right? So it's been fun, right? It's been a lot of fun. I think when I got here in 1982, I think there were 350,000 people in Las Vegas, or maybe 400,000. So you look now at, and again, I don't want to sound like one of those old guys, right? Back in my day. But, yeah, it's been a lot of fun to watch and fun to be a part of it, for sure.
And all the great stuff. I mean, let's talk about South Point Arena and all the great stuff going on there. I mean, to be able to stay in the world of events and sporting events and all different things you guys do I think we first met with the Clydesdales, which was one of my favorite. Yeah. That was a great thing for me to see up close, especially with the amazing, famous commercials. But tell me just a little bit about your day-to-day there and, being, the GM of the South Point Arena, how much that fulfills kind of like that leadership quarterback quality that you always, possessed.
Well, I gotta tell you how I got there first, and then we'll talk about that. But so in 1990, my center from UNLV and one of our kickers was working at the Thomas & Mack Center, and they had a sponsorship sales job that was open, so they asked me to come join them. So I started the Thomas & Mack Center in 1990, and I mean, national championship, Rebels. I mean, we were the only arena in the city. There was no MGM Grand Garden or Mandalay Bay or any of that, We were rolling. And so I was there for about 10 years, and we had a great run. And then Mr. Gahn, Michael Gahn, called me one day and said he wanted to build an arena at his Orleans Hotel Casino. So went over there, and we built that arena. We became wildly successful. And then about halfway in the middle of all that somewhere, he said he wanted to build an equestrian center at his new hotel. And I said, sir, I don't even know what that means. I don't even know what an equestrian center is. I mean, now I'm from Yuma, so I should have had a clue, but I thought equestrian was rodeo. That's what I thought, and I think that's what a lot of people think. So we started calling every equestrian association in America, every major promoter, anybody we could think of. And most of those people, almost all of them said, bad idea. These shows aren't coming to Vegas. Vegas is for what we were trying to build.
Really?
We wanted to build the premier equestrian facility in America. And a lot of these people were telling us, Steve, you're way too far from the central part of America. You're too far from Texas and Oklahoma.
Right.
And, where this all happens. It's too hot in Vegas. These people aren't going to haul their horses all that, length in the heat. And there are way too many distractions in Vegas for you guys, for these shows to come here. Well, as it turns out, so of course I go back and tell Mr. Gahn that, this is what we're hearing, sir. I'm not sure this is a good idea. And he says, well, I'm going to do it anyway, so you guys better figure it out. Okay, sir. And as it turns out, all of those things really became positives for us. Vegas is the catalyst, and our staff is amazing. What we do every day is amazing. Our venue is amazing. Our hotel property, our owners, it's amazing what we have. We have something very, very special. But Vegas starts the ball rolling. The fact we're in Vegas, people want to come to Vegas. They want to be part of this.
But South Point is still a destination in itself too, which is
no
so
question.
Fascinating. Because I used to live over in that area, and it's like, there's just a brand and like an authenticity that really engages with, the public, that it makes it such a destination. Yeah. I mean, Fox 5's finest, Jason Feinberg's there,
He's our man.
Every day, basically. Yeah. But there's a special quality about the place. What do you think it is?
It's the Gahn family, no question about it. It's Michael Gahn, it's Paula Gahn, it's his family. They have been in this community for 50, 60 years, and they're going to do the right thing always for their customers and for their employees. And it really is a special place, and I'm very, very blessed to be there, to be part of that. And it's really where the culture starts. As far as our equestrian center now, fast forward, I always say this about the Gahn family, about Mr. and Mrs. Gahn. They not only built the premier equestrian facility in America, which we've been considered that for quite some time now, they brought an entirely new industry, sports industry, to our city. So when you talk about the Knights and you talk about the Raiders and you talk about, by the way, my favorite all-time hometown team, I'm a lifelong Raiders fan, is UFC. UFC was born and bred here, the modern UFC as we know it. And, what they've been able to do has just been fascinating to watch their ascension. But the equestrian industry is now a big thing in Las Vegas. So when you go around the world or around the country, South Point, oh, equestrian, oh, South Point, World Series of Team, oh, South. So, it's a small niche, but it's another thing that we have in our city that we can bring people to enjoy. Along those lines, we built a 60-lane tournament bowling stadium, one of only 2 in the country.
Wow.
So now we're able to bring the largest bowling tournaments in the world to Las Vegas. So you're right, it's a special place, and, we don't have pool parties, we don't have nightclubs, but we have bowling and we have our equestrian center. So it's a very, very cool place to be.
And a good oyster bar.
And a great oyster bar, that's right.
And the buffet's still running strong.
Maybe one of the only ones left.
Right?
Yeah.
Real quickly, subcommittee, Super Bowl stuff. Tell me the excitement surrounding that.
There's another one, right? You never thought, 5 years ago, we weren't even able to advertise Las Vegas on the Super Bowl. Right. Now, all of a sudden, it's just crazy how, the sports betting thing has exploded and become legitimate and everything else. It's been a lot of fun to be part of that process. And we have a Super Bowl committee, which is headed by Maury Gallagher, Allegiant Airlines, Sandra Douglas, and Steve Hill, and of course all the big shots are on that one. But then we have several subcommittees where we're working on certain things in our areas. And it's been a lot of fun watching the process, how it works, how it unfolds. The NFL is still the 8,000-pound gorilla, and, they make all the shots. But, we're able to recommend some things to them. Hey, how about this, that? Because, they're going to different cities every year. So it's been a lot of fun being part of that process for sure. I'm very blessed.
What about Barry Odom? Let's talk about him.
Love Barry.
There's something different about this guy and the way that the presence that he has with this program. What do you think he's going to do with UNLV football?
I like Barry a lot. He's a football coach. I mean, when you go out to practice, when you see him walk around, he's a football coach. He's Belichick. He's in the baggy sweats. He's in the hoodie and the ball cap and the whistle hanging around the neck. And
meaning he's just thinking about football 24/7.
That's his thing. He's an old linebacker. He has that toughness mentality. He's put together a great staff, which is always key, as we know. He's done all the right things in our communities, recruiting local high schools. But I think one of the things that is going to make him or help make him successful, Mike, is that he's been in that chair before. So he was a head coach in the SEC at the University of Missouri. There's no bigger football conference in the world. So he knows what you have to do to win. He knows what you have to build and put together. And my only hope is that the university will also embrace what it takes. Because, you talk about the culture at our hotel, and it all starts at the top with Michael Gaughan. And he wants to win. We want to win. We hire people that want to win. We all do things to win. And I hope Barry gets that support from the university, because that's what it takes. It starts with our governor, quite honestly, and the legislature and the regents and the president of the university, all down to the equipment man, right? So if he gets that support from the institution, I have no doubt that he will get this ship turned around and go in the right way.
I love it. All right. And lastly, I know you're a big fantasy football guy. So tell me, from a fantasy football perspective, as a fan who's watching all these games and taking notes, having the perspective that you have as a former player playing quarterback at UNLV, what additives do you just have, intel, that you're kind of bringing into the fantasy world?
Well, the things I try to bring to it all backfire on me, Mike. So, although one did, I'll give you an example. I really, and listen, he's too good. This isn't going to last forever. But I knew when Joe Burrow missed camp, he's not going to be right. It's going to take him a while. So I passed on Joe Burrow.
About.
Right.
That's an important thing, because I think people forget. This is where you can help us with stuff. So missing camp like that and not playing any preseason football, what does that actually mean?
That means he wasn't with his brothers in the huddle. He wasn't, they weren't talking about it every day. He wasn't waking up every day and throwing reps and, learning everything every day. Now, he might have been going to meetings and that kind of stuff, but when you miss camp like that, you're just not going to be the same. But I'll tell you this, I did not start Travis Kelce the other day for the same reason. He was injured. He's coming back his first game. There's no way he's going to be successful and efficient. And, of course, the guy scores a touchdown. And,
So, and building that rapport, you would think, because Chase and Burrow, they don't look like they're on the same page like they used to be. So, I mean, it does take just that repetition when you're away from the game. Should players, you think, should there be a new trend where we're playing in preseason football more so, at least a game or two? Or how do you feel about that?
Well, it's crazy now because there's no such thing as two-a-days anymore. There's no such thing, you can't hit anymore like they used to. I mean, again, I hate to sound like the old guy, but shoot, we used to have three-a-days when I was in college, And if you remember back in our day, Mike, I mean, water was a privilege. If you practiced hard, you might get a drink of water, and they gave you salt tablets, Wow. I mean, it was like these coaches were trying to kill us when you look back on it. But yeah, no, it's so important that these guys play together. And yeah, I wish these guys would play a little more in the preseason. But I think it's going to take them 2 or 3 games to get going until we really kind of know how this whole thing is going to shake out a little bit, because this is preseason for most of these guys right now.
And from a fantasy football perspective, lastly, the camaraderie, do you keep in touch with a lot of guys, former teammates? Is this something that is very prevalent and a lot of players are consumed with fantasy football and it's just taken over, not just the guys who have never been in a huddle like me, but the guys who have been in a huddle like you? Do you think most people are like you, loving this kind of competition and bringing that into the fold with fantasy football?
Yeah, I think it helps a little bit. I think I don't know, a lot of the guys I played with really don't do it a whole lot, right? They're not the greatest fans in the world. But yeah, it's, again, that camaraderie of just everybody talking smack and talking mess on the weekends. And but you talk about the togetherness and camaraderie of football, Mike. We've probably had at UNLV, I think my math the other day, I think we've had about 1,600 players that have played at UNLV since our very first season, 1968.
Wow.
So of those 1,600 players, I have about 600 emails of all of them. So I communicate with them weekly. Anytime maybe one of our teammates passes away or there's information about the game that's coming up, I communicate with all these guys. So, there's definitely a brotherhood, man. And there's no brotherhood quite like football. And that's nothing against the other sports. But, when you're knocking heads against guys and going at each other every day in practice and being in that huddle, going to war, there's nothing like it. So, very honored and proud to do that and stay in touch with all my guys, too.
The great Steve Strip Stallworth. I think I'm going to start saying Strip.
There you go, mate.
I love it.
They'll think we were teammates, man, when you say that.
See,
That's right.
I like it. That's what I'm trying to get out of this. Any other things you want to mention, Steve?
No, Mike, I'm just proud that you're in our community. I'm excited about all of the initiatives you guys are doing here for local sports. I mean, as you mentioned before, I was one of the founders of the Southern Nevada Sports Hall of Fame, which is now 25 years strong. And when I see the new channel you guys started, the initiatives you're doing here in the Den and with the huddle, it's just so cool that that sports is so high profile now in our city. And sports business, it's a real industry. This isn't just something we all do as a hobby on the side. I mean, this is a real business that we're all in. So I'm just proud of you guys and everything that you guys here at Fox 5 have done to push that initiative.
Well, we appreciate it. And listen, anytime we can have a QB in the huddle with us, that's what it's all about. The great Steve Stallworth. Steve, thanks so much.
Mike.
You're a great guy doing great things in our community, and we're happy to have him here in Las Vegas. Guys, that is the Vegas Huddle. You can listen and subscribe to this wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to watch out for this episode on the Silver State Sports and Entertainment Network. And until next time, I'm Mike Davis from Inside the Den, the Vegas Huddle. Steve, great having you again, guys. I'll see you next time here in the Vegas Huddle.